Hello everyone. We will continue on with the City of Ember. We'll do a little bit of a recap from last time. We are in the middle of chapter 2. We learned a little bit more about Lena and her family. We met her little baby sister Poppy as well as her granny. We found out that about 2 years ago there was something called the coughing sickness that was going through the city, and her father unfortunately died. And then a few months later, her mom passed away while giving birth to Poppy, which would make Poppy about 2 years old right now. We also learned a little bit more about the city, about how it's completely surrounded by darkness, and they call that darkness the unknown regions. And they said that no one has ever gone into the unknown regions far and has come back. And also no one new has ever arrived in the City of Ember from the unknown regions either. And they all say that the darkness just goes on forever beyond the city. The last part that we were at, Lena is running around the City of Ember, delivering all of the messages since she began her first day at her new job as a messenger. And now we will continue with chapter 2. Late in the afternoon, a young man came up to her, walking with a sort of sideways lurch. He was an odd-looking person. He had a very long neck with a bump in the middle, and teeth so big that they looked as if they were trying to escape from his mouth. His black, bushy hair stuck out from his head in untidy tufts. "I have a message for the mayor at the gathering hall," he said. He paused to let the importance of this be understood. "The mayor," he said. "Did you get that?" "I got it," said Lena. "All right, listen carefully. Tell him, delivery at 8 from Looper." Repeat it back. "Delivery at 8 from Looper," Lena repeated. I mean, it was an easy message. "All right, no answer required." He handed her 20 cents and she sprinted away. The gathering hall occupied one entire side of Harkins Square, which was the city's central plaza. The square was paved with stone. It had a few benches bolted to the ground here and there, as well as a couple of kiosks for notices. Wide steps led up to the gathering hall, and fat columns framed its door. The mayor's office was in the gathering hall. So were the offices of the clerks, who kept track of which buildings had broken windows, what street lamps needed repair, and the number of people in the city. There was the office of the timekeeper, who was in charge of the town clock, and there were offices for the guards who enforced the laws of Ember, now and then putting pickpockets or people who got in fights into the prison room. A small one-story structure with a sloping roof that jutted out from one side of the building. Lena ran up the steps and through the door into the broad hallway. On the left was a desk, and at the desk sat a guard. Barton Snod, assistant guard, said a badge on his chest. He was a big man with wide shoulders, brawny arms, and a thick neck, but his head looked as if it didn't belong to his body. It was small and round and topped with a fuzz of extremely short hair. His lower jaw jutted out and moved a little from side to side, as if he were chewing on something. When he saw Lena, his jaw stopped moving for a moment, and his lips curled upward in a very small smile. "Good day," he said. "What business brings you here today?" "I have a message for the mayor." "Oh, very good, very good." Barton Snod heaved himself to his feet. "Step this way." He led Lena down the corridor and opened a door marked reception room. "Wait here, please," he said. "The mayor is in the basement office on private business, but he will be up shortly." Lena went inside. "I'll notify the mayor," said Barton Snod. "Please have a seat. The mayor will be right with you, or pretty soon." He left, closing the door behind him. And a second later, the door opened again, and the guard's small fuzzy head reappeared. "What is the message?" he asked. "Oh, I have to give it to the mayor in person," said Lena. Of course, said the guard, and the door closed again. He doesn't seem very sure about things, Lena thought. Maybe he is new at his job. The reception room was shabby, but Lena could tell it had once been impressive. The walls were dark red, with brownish patches where the paint was peeling away. In the right-hand wall was a closed door. An ugly brown carpet lay on the floor, and on it stood a large armchair covered in itchy-looking red material, and several small chairs. A small table held a teapot and some cups, and a larger table in the middle of the room displayed a copy of the book of the City of Ember, lying open as if someone were going to read it. Portraits of all the mayors of the city since the beginning of time hung on the walls, staring solemnly from behind pieces of old glass window. Lena sat in the big armchair and waited. No one came. She got up and wandered around the room. She bent over the book of the City of Ember and read a few sentences. The citizens of Ember may not have luxuries, but the foresight of the builders, who filled the storerooms at the beginning of time, has ensured that there will always be enough. And enough is all that a person of wisdom needs. She flipped a few pages. The gathering hall clock, she read, measures the hours of night and day. It must never be allowed to run down. Without it, how would we know when to go to work and when to go to school? How would the light director know when to turn the lights on and when to turn them off again? It is the job of the timekeeper to wind the clock every week and to place the date sign in Harkin Square every day. The timekeeper must perform these duties faithfully. Lena knew that not all timekeepers were as faithful as they should be. She heard of one some years ago who often forgot to change the date sign so that it might say Wednesday, week 38, year 227 for several days in a row. There had even been a timekeeper who forgot to wind the clock so that it might stand at noon or at midnight for hours at a time, causing a very long day or a very long night. The result was that no one really knew anymore exactly what day of the week it was or exactly how many years it had been since the building of the city. They called this the year 241, but it might have been 245 or 239 or 250. As long as the clock's deep boom rang out every hour and the lights went on and off more or less regularly, it didn't seem to matter. Lena left the book and examined the pictures of the mayors. The seventh mayor, Pod Morthwot, was her great, she didn't know how many greats, grandfather. He looked quite dreary, Lena thought. His cheeks were long and hollow and his mouth turned down at the corners, and there was a lost look in his eyes. The picture she liked best was of the fourth mayor, Jane Larkett, who had a serene smile and fuzzy black hair. Still, no one came. She heard no sounds from the hallway. Maybe they'd forgotten her. Lena went over to the closed door in the right-hand wall. She pulled it open and saw stairs going up. Maybe while she waited, she'd just see where they went. She started upward. At the top of the first flight was a closed door. Carefully, she opened it. She saw another hallway and more closed doors. She shut the door and kept going. Her footsteps sounded loud on the wood, and she was afraid someone would hear her and come and scold her. No doubt she was not supposed to be here. But no one came, and she climbed on, passing another closed door. The gathering hall was the only building in Ember with 3 stories. She had always wanted to stand on its roof and look out at the city. Maybe from there, it would be possible to see beyond the city into the unknown regions. If the bright city of her drawings really did exist, it would be out there somewhere. At the top of the stairs, she came to a door marked Roof, and she pushed it open. Chilly air brushed her skin. She was outside. Ahead of her was a flat gravel surface, and about 10 paces away, she could see the high wall of the clock tower. She went to the edge of the roof. From there, she could see the whole of Ember. Directly below was Harkin Square, where people were moving this way and that. all of them appearing from this top-down view more round than tall. Beyond Harkin Square, the lighted windows of the building made checkered lines, yellow and black, row after row in all directions. She tried to see farther, across the unknown regions, but she couldn't. At the edges of the city, the lights were so far away that they made a kind of haze. She could see nothing beyond them but blackness. She heard a shout from the square below. "Look!" came a small but piercing voice. "Someone's on the roof!" She saw a few people stop and look up. "Who is it? What is she doing?" someone cried. More people gathered until a crowd was standing on the steps of the gathering hall. "They see me," Lena thought, and it made her laugh. She waved at the crowd and did a few steps from the Bugfoot Scurry dance, which she learned on Clothing Square Dance Day, and they laughed and shouted some more. Then the door behind her burst open, and a huge guard with a bushy black beard was suddenly running toward her. "Halt!" he shouted, though she wasn't going anywhere. He grabbed her by the arm. "What are you doing here?" "I was just curious," said Lena in her most innocent voice. "I just wanted to see the city from the roof." She read the guard's name badge, and it said Reg Stabmark, Chief Guard. "Curiosity leads to trouble," said Reg Stabmark. He peered down at the crowd. "You have caused a commotion." He pulled her toward the door and hustled her down all 3 flights of stairs. When they came out into the waiting room, Barton Snod was standing there and looking flustered, his jaw twitching from side to side. Next to him was the mayor. "A child causing trouble, Mayor Cole," said the chief guard. The mayor glared at her. "I recall your face from assignment day. Shame, disgracing yourself in your new job." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," said Lena. "I was looking for you so that I could deliver a message." "Shall we put her in the prison room for a day or two?" asked the chief guard. The mayor frowned. He pondered a moment. "What is the message?" he said. He bent down so that Lena could speak into his ear. She noticed that he smelled a little like overcooked turnips. "Delivery at 8, Lena whispered, "from Looper." The mayor smiled a tight little smile. He turned to the guard. "That's just child antics," he said. "We will let it go this time. From now on," he said to Lena, "behave yourself." "Yes, Mr. Mayor," said Lena. "And you," said the mayor, turning to the assistant guard and shaking a thick finger at him, "watch visitors much more carefully." And Barton Snod blinked and nodded. Lena ran for the door. Outside, the small crowd was standing by the steps. A few of them cheered as Lena came out. Others frowned at her and muttered words like mischief and silliness and show-off. Lena felt embarrassed suddenly. She hadn't meant to show off. She hurried past, out into Otterville Street, and started to run. She didn't see Dune, who was among those watching her. He had been on his way home from his first day in the pipeworks when he'd come across the cluster of people gazing up at the roof of the gathering hall and laughing. He was tired and chilly. The bottoms of his pant legs were wet, and mud clung to his shoes and smeared his hands. When he raised his eyes and saw the small figure next to the clock tower, he realized right away that it was Lena. He saw her raise her arm and wave and hop about, and for a second, he wondered what it would be like to be up there, looking out over the whole city, laughing and waving. When Lena came down, he wanted to speak to her, but he knew he was filthy looking and that she would ask him questions that he didn't want to answer. So he turned away. Walking fast, he headed for home. The next chapter is chapter 3, called Under Ember. That morning, Dune had arrived at the pipeworks full of anticipation. This was the world of serious work at last, where he would get a chance to do something useful. What he'd learned in school, and from his father, and from his investigations, he could put it all to good purposes now. He pushed open the heavy pipeworks door and stepped inside. The air smelled strongly of dampness and moldy rubber, which seemed to him a pleasant, interesting smell. He strode up a hallway where yellow slickers hung from pegs on the walls. At the end of the hallway was a room full of people, some of them sitting on benches and pulling on high-knee rubber boots, some struggling into their slickers, some buckling on tool belts. A ruckus clamor filled the room. Dune watched from the doorway, eager to join, but not sure what to do. And after a moment, a man emerged from the throng. He thrust out a hand. "Lister Monk, Pipeworks Director," he said. "You're the new boy, right? What size feet do you have? Large, medium, or small?" "Medium," said Dune. And Lister found a slicker and a pair of boots. The boots were so ancient that their green rubber was cracked all over, as if covered with spiderwebs. He gave Dune a tool belt, too, in which were wrenches and hammers, spools of wire and tape, and tubes of some sort of black goop. "You'll be in Tunnel 97 today," Lister said. "Arlen Frall will go down with you and show you what to do." He pointed at a short, delicate-looking girl with a white blonde braid down her back. "She may not look like an expert, but she is." Dune buckled his tool belt around his waist and put on his slicker, which for some reason smelled like sweaty feet. "This way," said Arlen, without saying hello or smiling. She wove through the crowd of workers to the door marked Stairway and opened it. Stone steps led so far down that Dune couldn't see the end of them. On either side was a sheer wall of dark reddish stone glistening with dampness. There was no railing. Along the ceiling ran a single wire from which a light bulb hung every few yards. Water stood in shallow pools on each stair, in the hollow worn into the stones by years of footsteps. They started down. Dune concentrated on his feet. The clumsy boots made it hard not to stumble. As they went deeper, he began to hear a low roar. So low, he seemed to hear it more with his stomach than his ears. It grew louder and louder. Was it a machine of some kind? Maybe the generator? The stairway came to an end at a door marked Main Tunnel. Arlen opened it as they stepped through, and Dune realized that the sound he had been hearing wasn't a machine. It was the river. He stood still staring. Like most people, he had never really been sure what a river was, just that it was water that somehow flowed on its own. He imagined it would be like a clear, narrow stream that came out of the kitchen faucet, only bigger, and horizontal instead of vertical. But this was something entirely different. Not a stream of water, but endless tons of it pouring by. Wide as the widest street in Ember, churning and dipping and swirling. The river roared past, its turbulent surface like black liquid glass, scattered with flecks of light. Dune had never seen anything that moved so fast, and he had never heard such a thunderous, heart-stopping roar. The path they stood on was about 6 feet wide and ran parallel to the river for farther than Dune could see in both directions. In the wall along the path were openings that must lead, Dune thought, to the tunnels that branched out everywhere below the city. A string of lights, like the one in the stairway, hung high up against the arched ceiling. Dune knew he was standing beneath the north edge of Ember. In school, you were taught to remember the directions this way. North was the direction of the river, south was the direction of the greenhouses, east was the direction of the school, and west was the direction left over, having nothing in particular to mark it. All the pipeworks tunnels branched off from the main tunnel to the south toward the city. Arlen leaned toward Dune and shouted into his ear, "First we'll go to the beginning of the river. she said. She led him up the main tunnel for a long way. They passed other people in yellow slickers who greeted Arlen with a nod and glanced curiously at Dune. After 15 minutes or so, they came to the east side of the pipeworks, where the river surged up from a deep chasm in the ground, churning so violently that its dark water turned white and filled the air with a spray that wet Dune's face. In the wall to their right was a wide double door. "See that door right there?" Arlen shouted, pointing. "Yes," Dune shouted back. "That's the generator room." "Can we go in?" "Of course not," said Arlen. "You have to have special permission." She pointed back down the main tunnel. "Now we'll go to the end of the river," she said. She led him back, past the stairway door, all the way back to the west, all the way to the west edge of the pipeworks. There, the river flowed into a huge opening in the wall and vanished into darkness. "Where does it go?" Dune asked. Arlen shrugged. "Back into the ground, I guess. Well, now let's find Tunnel 97 and get to work." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "This is the map," she said. "You have one in your pocket, too. You have to use the map to find your way around in here." The map looked to Dune like an immense centipede. The river arched across the top of the page like the centipede's body, and the tunnels dangled down from it like hundreds of long, long legs, all tangled up with each other. To get to Tunnel 97, they followed a complicated route through passageways lined with crusty, rusted pipes that carried water to all the buildings of Ember. Puddles stood on the floor of the tunnel, and water dripped in brown rivulets down the walls. Just as in the main tunnel, there was a string of bulbs along the ceiling that provided dim light. Dune occupied his mind by calculating how far underground he was. From the river to the ceiling of the main tunnel must be 30 feet or so, he thought. And above that were the storerooms, which occupied a layer at least 20 feet high. So that means that he was 50 feet underground with tons of earth and rock and buildings above him. The thought made him tense up his shoulders. He cast a quick glance upward, as if all that weight might collapse onto his head. "Here we are," said Arlen. She was standing next to a leak that spurted a stream of water straight out from the wall. "We have to turn the shut-off valve. Take the pipe apart, put on a new connector, and stick it back together again." With wrenches, hammers, washes, and black goop, they did this, getting soaked in the process. It took them most of the morning and proved to Dune that the city was even in worse shape than he had suspected. Not only were the lights about to fail and the supplies about to run out, but the water system was breaking down. The whole city was crumbling, and what was anyone doing about it? When lunch break came, Arlen took her lunch sack from her pocket and her tool belt and went off to meet some friends a few tunnels away. "You stay right here and wait until I get back," she said as she left. "If you wander around, you'll get lost." But Dune set out as soon as she disappeared. Using his map, he found his way back to the main tunnel, then hurried to the east side. He wasn't going to wait for special permission to see the generator. He was pretty sure he could find a way to get in on his own, and he did. He simply stood by the door and waited for someone to come out. Quite soon, a stout woman carrying a lunch sack pushed open the door and walked away. She didn't notice him. Before the door could close again, Dune slipped inside. And this is where we will end for today.